I've asked you, what are your insecurities? Why do you think you have them? But how do we deal with them in the here and now? Hey fam, and welcome back to Empowering Creativity, where I empower others to live purposeful lives through creativity. My name is Anna, and a while back I asked you all to answer some questions on my Instagram stories about insecurities, and I was blown away by a lot of your responses. The reason why I was asking those questions is because someone actually asked me to do a video on insecurities, and at first I'll admit that I was kind of like, oh, that would be such an easy video to make. You know, I would just talk about those verses that say, man looks at the outward appearance, but God looks at the heart. We are fearfully and wonderfully made. You know, you don't have to worry about what other people think, like all that kind of stuff. And then I was realizing, as actually one of my friends was asking on her Instagram about the idea of prettiness and if we feel like we're pretty and why we wouldn't feel like we're pretty and things like that. And it just got me thinking. So I asked her if I could steal her idea and ask sort of the same questions on my Instagram about insecurities and just see where that took me. And like I said, I was blown away by your responses. And by the way, thank you so much for doing that, because it is not easy to be vulnerable, to share those things and to think deeper about yourself in that ways and then share that with other people. So thank you so much to everyone who did respond, who did answer my questions. So yeah, I realized as I was reading through each of your responses that there's actually like so much to talk about in terms of insecurities. And so that's why I'm going to do an actual video series about insecurities. We're going to be talking about how sometimes insecurities can be a good thing. We're going to be talking about how to work through certain insecurities and why we need to work through them as well. Now, this video isn't supposed to make people who don't really feel like they have any insecurities feel bad. Like, you know, even though 95% of you said that you probably have a few insecurities, 5% of you said that you didn't really feel like you had any insecurities, and that's okay too. I remember my sister telling me the story of when she was in like grade 7, I think, so like 12, and they split up their class into like girls and boys, and the girls went off and talked about these things, and I don't even know what the guys talked about, but my sister was sharing that like I was sitting in that group of girls, and the teacher asked, like, raise your hand if you've ever felt, or if you feel right now insecure about anything, like looks, personality, things like that or whatever. And pretty much everyone raised their hand. And then she asked, raise your hand if you don't feel that way. And my sister, one of my sisters, I have two, she was the only one who kind of like raised her hand, and she was just sharing with me how she started to feel a little bit insecure about not having insecurities. And I just thought, oh, how ironic that is. Yeah, I think, you know, it's not really abnormal to not have insecurities. And I hope that even if you feel like you don't have any insecurities, you can kind of gain some insight from this and help your friends who maybe do have insecurities, or maybe this video will help you identify ones that you didn't even know that you had and help you deal with them as well, or something like that. I don't know, but I hope that this can be some value to you as well. The first thing that I want to do is actually just share some stats with you from the Instagram poll that I did. I mentioned before, 95% of you did say that maybe you have a few insecurities. As I asked more questions about the insecurities, I began to separate them into different categories. So I separated some insecurities that had to do with image, and then insecurities that had to do with achievement. Now, some of you answered and your answers sort of like overlapped, and maybe they were both. Maybe they were insecurities to do with image and insecurities to do with achievement. 58% of you had insecurities to do with image. 52.6% of you had insecurities to do with achievement. Now, for the second question that I asked, which was, why do you think you have those insecurities? 25% of you said that you think that you have those because of past experiences. Another 25% of you answered you have those insecurities because of comparison, like comparing to other people. 31% of you answered that you have those insecurities because you're looking to others or society or the media instead of looking to God to feel secure. And then 12.5% of you answered that you probably have those insecurities because of some form of people pleasing and your desire to just make people happy. Which, by the way, some of these answers were like super relatable. Someone said like they feel insecure about their double chin, and I was just like, me too. Also, someone had put that one of their insecurities was like disappointing people. Literally, that was actually, so in grade 12, I had to do this art project about one of our greatest fears, and I drew a picture of an eye with like a tear falling out because my greatest fear was disappointing people. Some things to take note of as I go through this series is just some things that I found kind of interesting in the stats. So I noticed that 5% of people that did say that they didn't really feel like they had any insecurities were male. Notice that the males that did answer that did have insecurities, they answered what the insecurities were. Most of theirs were actually achievement-based, whereas I noticed the females struggled more with achievement-based insecurities and image-based insecurities. I think that really does have a lot to do with how the media portrays women. I also think that now I am all for like feminism and equal rights and stuff like that, but I think that since the feminist movement has come about, there's been more and more pressure for women to be like career driven and have like very achievement based results and things. And don't get me wrong, as much as I love feminism and all of the good things that they have fought for, like I wouldn't be able to vote without women fighting for my rights to vote, and I'm really thankful for the wealth of opportunity that I have. Like I wouldn't have been able to go to school to become a high school teacher even just like 50 years ago or something, right? It would have been hard for me to do that. But I also think that with feminism has come more of a pressure to be a career-driven woman and to just be able to show the world your accomplishments. Whereas like back in the day, women were more tethered to the home and their children. And like, I'm not saying that it was perfect back then, obviously. Like, you know, if you were a woman and you couldn't have kids back then, that was like really shameful, and that's not like, I'm not for that. But anyway, I hope you kind of get what I'm saying in terms of there's just like a lot of pressure for women, and I'm not saying that there's not a lot of pressure for men. They just have pressure in different ways, and I think that's why their insecurities are more achievement based rather than image based, if that makes sense. I don't know, you guys can agree or disagree with me on that one, but that is just something that I noticed from your responses and from the stats that I got from your responses. So then after I asked you all what insecurities you have and why you think you have them, then my next question would be, I didn't ask this on my Instagram story, but I'm asking it now. My next question would be, how do we deal with them in the here and now? I've asked you, what are your insecurities? Why do you think you have them? But how do we deal with them in the here and now? And I loved some of your responses to the why question, that some of us are looking to others and society and the media rather than looking to God for our self-worth. And I definitely think that that is 100% a part of it, which is why I totally believe in those verses that say, man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. And we are fearfully and wonderfully made by an awesome, mighty God who loves us more than we could ever imagine. But sometimes knowing that and having it as like our identity and having it sort of connect in with our insecurities is really difficult. So that's what I want to talk with you about in this series. And it's important to answer this question because sometimes our insecurities drive us to do things that we shouldn't, whether we realize it or not. Sometimes we just lash out at people, or our pride, it just goes sky high to compensate for our insecurities, or sometimes we beat ourselves up, and none of those are healthy or biblical responses to insecurities. So this is just my introduction video to the series, explaining to you why I want to do this series, why I think it's important, and hopefully you can learn something from it. So stay tuned to the next video where I will be sharing the first step in understanding our insecurities and how we can deal with them. So far, I have 4 steps altogether, so there will be another 4 videos after this one, and I'm really excited to share all of the notes I've taken from books I've read and sermons I've watched and things like that. I hope that this series is somewhat valuable to you and you can learn from it.